It was a crisp October morning in Manhattan. The kind of morning where the sky wore its clearest blue and the air tasted like coming change. Victor Ellington adjusted the cuffs of his hand-tailored coat as he stepped out of the black car. His driver had parked just along Central Park West, per his usual routine after dropping him off at the Ellington Foundation headquarters. Victor was 72, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, and the very definition of old-money elegance. His shoes shone with a mirror finish, his cane polished to perfection, and his reputation solidified in the city's philanthropic elite. The tabloids called him the last gentleman of New York. But that morning, nothing about him would remain untouched. He was halfway through the park, where rust-colored leaves danced around his feet, when he saw her. She sat on a bench, surrounded by two shopping carts packed with worn blankets, empty bottles, a stuffed rabbit missing an ear, and something resembling a journal held together with duct tape. She looked small, a bent silhouette under an oversized brown coat, her silver curls tangled but clean. At first, Victor meant to look away. He usually did, not out of cruelty, but because it was easier. But then she looked up, and the world stopped. Her eyes, the same green-gold eyes. There was no mistaking them. His cane trembled in his hand. He forgot how to breathe. "Elizabeth," he whispered, though she was still several steps away. She turned fully to face him, her expression unreadable. Her eyes didn't widen in recognition. She simply nodded once, slow and steady, as though this meeting had been expected not just today, but for decades. Victor stumbled forward. "Elizabeth Montgomery?" His voice cracked, sounding nothing like the smooth, composed tone he used in boardrooms and galas. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. It was her. After nearly 40 years. The woman he had once loved. The woman who vanished after a single phone call. The woman he thought had moved on, or died, or anything but this. Victor sank down on the bench beside her, heedless of the dirt and smell and what anyone might think. He had to understand. Had to know. "Lizzie, what would happen to you?" She looked at him as if seeing straight through to his soul. "You happened," she said, her voice hoarse but unwavering. Back in 1981, Elizabeth Montgomery was the rising star of New York's art world. Fierce, beautiful, and unapologetically brilliant. She painted the truth of the city, not its skyline, but its underbelly. And Victor, a fresh-faced investment banker at the time, had been enchanted by her wild spirit. They had lived in a loft in Soho before it became Soho. She painted while he read poetry aloud. Their love was the kind that rewrote you. Victor had plans to propose. He'd even hidden the ring in her favorite mug, waiting for the perfect moment. But then everything changed. He got a call from his father, Henry Ellington, the titan of finance, the kingmaker of legacies. "End it," his father had said, "or I end you." Victor resisted. For days, weeks. But the threats grew darker. His trust fund, his job, even Elizabeth's gallery sponsorship all held hostage. He thought he could protect her by walking away. Without explanation. Without goodbye. So, one rainy night, he left. "You said nothing," Elizabeth murmured, snapping him back to the present. "Not a letter. Not a call. I thought you were dead or ashamed. I begged your assistant for answers. I waited. Then I stopped waiting." Victor's heart thundered with shame. I thought leaving was the only way to keep you safe." She gave a bitter laugh. "From what? Your love?" "No. From my father's wrath. I thought he would ruin you." "He did." Those two words landed like a hammer on Victor's chest. "I lost everything when you left," she continued. "The gallery pulled out. My landlord doubled the rent. I tried to survive, but it was like dominoes. You were the first to fall, and everything came crashing after." Victor's eyes burned. "Why didn't you come to me?" "I did. Your doorman said you'd moved. Your office said you were abroad. I tried for months. I didn't know. I slept in shelters," she said softly. "I painted portraits in the park for food. I tried so hard to climb back. But New York doesn't let go once it's pushed you to the bottom." Victor stared at her hands. They were still those of an artist's long fingers, graceful but calloused now, cracked at the knuckles. And your family? She turned her head, looking toward the trees. Dead. All of them. Mom died the year after. Cancer. I had no one left. Silence thickened between them. I thought of you every day, Victor said. She didn't reply. I still have your paintings, he continued. I bought them back when I could find them. I've spent years trying to find you. She turned to face him again, her expression unreadable. Why now, she asked. I didn't know you were alive, he confessed. Until just now. Elizabeth took a shaky breath and looked away. I live in a church basement on 93rd. They give me soup if I sweep the floors. Victor felt something crack open inside his chest. Come with me, he said quickly. Right now? I have a spare apartment. You can have anything. A doctor, clothes, food, a warm bed. I'm not your pity project. No, he said firmly. You're the only woman I've ever loved. Her lips quivered, but she said nothing. He continued, You never stopped being an artist. You never stopped matching. Too late for that, she muttered. But Victor shook his head. It's never too late. A flock of birds erupted from the trees behind them, scattering like paper in the wind. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, Elizabeth stood. Her caneus stick wrapped in black electrical tape wobbled as she steadied herself. She looked down at him, at this man she once trusted, once kissed in the rain, once believed would stand by her forever. I'll walk with you, she said. But no promises. Victor stood beside her. No promises, he echoed. They walked side by side, past joggers and dog walkers, through rustling leaves and the quiet whispers of a city that never really sleeps. Inside the Ellington apartment on Park Avenue, Victor helped her sit on the cream velvet couch, a place she would never have been allowed decades ago. Elizabeth's eyes scanned the room, marble floors, brass lighting, a grand piano untouched for years. Too clean, she muttered, and he smiled. She hesitated to touch anything. Her hands hovered over a silk pillow, as though her presence might stain it. Can I? She gestured awkwardly. Whatever you want, he said. She sank into the couch with a soft sigh. Later that evening, Victor served her soup himself. Not a butler, not a chef, just a man trying to unbreak time. Over dinner, she asked, Do you believe in redemption? He met her gaze. I believe in you. She looked away, and her voice trembled. I still dream in color. I thought I lost that. You didn't, he whispered. You just forgot where the paintbrush was. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. And Victor knew this was only the beginning. Elizabeth awoke to soft light pouring in from tall windows framed by velvet drapes. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The smell of citrus and lavender, the warmth of real linen, the hum of silence to clean it, all felt foreign. Then it came back to her. The bench, the park, Victor. She sat up slowly on the edge of the bed, her body stiff with years of neglect. Her thin fingers trembled as she reached for the glass of water on the nightstand. Someone had placed it there. Him, maybe. The door creaked open. You're awake, Victor said gently, stepping into the room. He carried a tray with oatmeal, berries, and a cup of tea. I wasn't sure you'd stay, he added, placing the tray on the side table. I wasn't either, she murmured, eyeing the food. Do you want me to leave you alone? No, just give me a moment. Victor nodded and stepped back, watching her without intruding. Her hair was brushed now, loosely tied with a silk ribbon, likely something one of the house staff had done while she slept. She looked older, thinner, but the core of her strong, defiant remained untouched. When she finally ate, it was in silence. But the way she closed her eyes after every bite told him she hadn't had a meal like this in years. Thank you, she whispered. You never have to thank me, Lizzie. She gave him a small, tired smile. That's not how I remember you. He accepted the comment without defense. After breakfast, she wandered through the apartment slowly, like a ghost retracing a life she never got to live. Victor followed her at a respectful distance. There were photos of him on the wall shaking hands with mayors, standing beside opera singers, cutting ribbons at children's hospitals. "What is all this?" she asked. "The foundation. I started it after Dad passed. We do grants for the arts, homeless outreach, youth education." She turned to him, eyes narrowed. "You run programs for the homeless?" "Yes. And yet, you never saw me. I've thought about that every day." She looked at him for a long moment, then kept walking. When she stopped in front of one of the paintings, hers, from 1980, she touched it with reverence. "You kept this." "I bought it back at an auction 20 years ago." Her fingers brushed the corner. "This was the last thing I painted before I lost my apartment." "I know." Her voice was brittle when she asked, "Why didn't you come find me after your father died?" "I didn't know how. I was afraid you'd moved on, that you hated me, or worse, that you were gone." She didn't answer. Instead, she sat on the couch and stared out the window. "You know," she said softly, "there's something I never told you." He sat across from her. "I was pregnant. After you left." The room went silent. Victor froze. "I didn't know for sure until 2 weeks after you disappeared. And then I had no money, no job, no home. I miscarried in a shelter in Queens." Her voice was calm, too calm, like she'd folded the memory into a box she never dared reopen. Victor's eyes welled. He covered his mouth with a trembling hand. "Lizzie, I don't tell you this to hurt you. I tell you because you deserve to carry the truth, just like I did." He got up and kneeled before her, his hands gently cradling hers. "I'm so sorry. I should have fought harder. I should have trusted us." She looked down at him. "It's in the past now. The question is, what do we do with the present?" Over the next week, Elizabeth stayed in the guest suite. She declined the housekeeper's help, preferring to clean up after herself. She refused a credit card, refused new clothes until her old ones were properly laundered. But she painted. Victor set up a small studio in the sunroom. Brushes, canvases, oils, everything exactly as she once had. She spent hours there, silent but alive in a way he hadn't seen since they were young. On the third night, he found her asleep in front of a half-finished canvas. He covered her with a blanket and sat beside her until morning. Each day, she opened a little more. She asked about his marriages. There had been two, neither lasting more than a few years. "No children, no great loves. None after you," he said simply. She didn't say anything, but the corner of her mouth twitched slightly. On the seventh night, she stood in the living room holding an envelope. "I wrote something," she said. Victor opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter handwritten in elegant cursive. It read, "To the man who left me. I hated you. For years. I hated the rain because it reminded me of you. I hated poetry. I hated Soho. I hated the sound of footsteps that weren't yours. I hated my reflection because it reminded me of who I used to be when I believed in us. But hate is just the child of love abandoned. I didn't die because I couldn't. Because part of me still hoped you would walk into the shelter one day. That you would say it was all a mistake. That you were here now, and it was over. You didn't. Not then. But you're here now. And for some strange reason, I believe you mean it. Don't ask for forgiveness. Ask for truth. And build something from there. Lizzie." He folded the letter with trembling hands. "I want to do something," he said. "For me?" she asked. "For us. For the ones like you, who fall through the cracks." She raised an eyebrow. "I want to start a program. Under the foundation. An artist residency, full room and board, therapy, supplies. No deadlines. No pressures. Just dignity. I want to name it after you." She blinked, surprised. "The Elizabeth Montgomery Project?" He smiled. "No, just Lizzie's Light." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "That's beautiful." "You are." She rolled her eyes. "You're still bad with flattery." "I'm serious. You survived what should have broken you. And you're still creating. That's something the world needs to see." She sat beside him, quieter now. "I don't want to be your legacy, Victor. You're not. You're your own. I just want to help carry it forward." The press release went out 2 weeks later. The art world buzzed. Social media lit up with speculation. Who was Lizzie? Why had Victor Ellington named his new project after a mystery woman? But Elizabeth stayed out of the spotlight. She didn't want interviews. She just wanted a corner to paint. In the spring, Victor took her to a fundraiser gala hosted by the Met. The city gasped. Cameras flashed. And Elizabeth, wearing a vintage black velvet gown, stood poised beside Victor like she belonged there because she did. One art critic, seeing her earlier work displayed in the gala hall, wept openly. Another whispered, "Where has she been all these years?" Victor answered, calmly, waiting to be seen. As they danced under the glittering chandeliers, he leaned close and said, "May I come home with you tonight?" She smirked. "You mean into the guest room you gave me?" "I mean the one next to mine." She tilted her head. "Ask again tomorrow." He smiled. "I will." Spring arrived in New York like a soft sigh after a long, bitter silence. The parks bloomed in wild color, and for the first time in decades, Elizabeth Montgomery had a key to a front door, not a shelter code or a halfway house schedule, but a real key to a real home. Her studio, bathed in golden morning light, had grown into a quiet sanctuary. Brushes lined up like soldiers, canvases drying along the far wall, and music, always classical, playing in the background. She painted for hours without pause, her energy fueled by something deeper than survival, renewal. Victor watched her work from the doorway most mornings, coffee in hand, his own life rearranging itself around her presence. He had canceled meetings, postponed boardrooms, even forgotten to shave. The man who had once ruled Midtown from a skyscraper now prioritized silence, art, and the look on her face when she stepped back to examine her work. One afternoon, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "You know what I realized today?" "What?" "I don't carry fear the same way anymore." Victor set down his mug. "When did it change?" "I think the moment I knew I didn't have to survive alone anymore." She turned back to her canvas, voice softer now. "It's like being poor trains you to shrink yourself, to not expect too much from the world. But painting again, really painting, it stretches me out again. Like I'm allowed to take up space." "You've always deserved space," he said. She smiled faintly. "You say that now. But back then." He nodded solemnly. "I know." By summer, Lizzie's Light opened its doors to its first cohort. 6 women, all formerly homeless, each with a passion for painting, poetry, sculpture, or photography. The program offered them private housing in Brooklyn, a small monthly stipend, therapy sessions, and, most importantly, a gallery space to showcase their work. Elizabeth insisted on meeting each woman personally. She shook their hands one by one, her own fingers trembling slightly. "I'm not here to fix you," she told them. "I'm just here to make sure you have the light you need to grow." One woman, named Tanya, burst into tears. "You're her, aren't you?" Tanya whispered. "You're the one who lived in the East 93rd shelter in 2002. You used to give me half your soup." Elizabeth froze, then nodded slowly. "I didn't forget you." Tanya hugged her, and Victor saw something shift in Elizabeth, something deep and final, like the last brick in a collapsed building finally falling into place. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a guide. That summer was the first in decades where Victor didn't feel alone in his own home. He and Elizabeth fell into a rhythm as if no time had passed, reading in bed, cooking together. She teased him for still burning toast, taking walks along the Hudson, arguing playfully over which painter was more misunderstood. But not everything came easily. One morning, Elizabeth found herself frozen in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush hanging limply in her hand. Victor passed by and noticed her distant expression. "Lizzie." She blinked. "I don't know who that is," she whispered. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know who I was. And I know who I've had to be. But this version of me? In silk robes, with access to coffee that costs $15 a bag." She shook her head. "It doesn't feel real. Sometimes I feel like I'm impersonating someone who was never broken." Victor stepped closer. You're not impersonating. You're healing. There's a difference. But what if I don't know who I am when I'm not fighting to stay alive? He held her hands. Then we figure it out. Together. In July, Elizabeth's painting The Bench was selected for display at the Whitney Museum's Emerging Voices program. It depicted a silver-haired woman wrapped in a coat too big, sitting on a Central Park bench, staring at the skyline with defiant eyes. The critics called it haunting, honest, and unforgiving. She declined interviews but agreed to speak at the opening. Her voice echoed through the gallery as she stood before the painting, wearing a midnight blue dress and a single silver chain Victor had given her years ago. I didn't paint this to make you feel pity, she began. I painted this so you'd remember what it cost to look away. She paused. Every person on the street has a story. Some of us used to be loved. Some of us used to be brilliant. Some of us still are. But brilliance is hard to see when it's wrapped in cardboard and soaked in rain. The room was silent. Then applause. Quiet at first, then rising like thunder. Victor stood in the back, tears in his eyes. That night, they walked along Riverside Park, the wind soft against the river. I was proud of you today, Victor said. She smiled. I was proud of me too. They stopped at a bench. The bench. It was the same one where he'd found her. They sat down slowly. I come back here sometimes, she said, to remind myself it was real, that I survived it. Victor reached for her hand. Lizzie. She turned to him. I know, she said, smiling gently. Me too. And then, with the calmness of someone who had traveled through hell and come out singing, she kissed him. It wasn't desperate or hungry. It was soft, quiet, like a promise made at sunrise. 1 year later, the second cohort of Lizzie's Light had arrived. 12 artists this time. 2 had already secured galleries. 1 had sold a piece to a collector in London. Elizabeth, now the official director of artistic programs, hosted weekly workshops. She taught techniques, told stories, offered gentle critiques, but most of all, she listened. At home, she and Victor had quietly married. No press, no fanfare, just them, in the courtyard of the Brooklyn residency, surrounded by candles and the paintings of the women whose lives were already being changed. Tanya officiated the ceremony. You found each other, she said, on the same bench where the world forgot you. Afterward, Elizabeth said to Victor, I never thought I'd wear white again. He kissed her cheek. You didn't need to. You were always light to me. One evening, while cleaning out an old storage unit, Victor found something he hadn't seen in 40 years. A mug. Her favorite one. The one with the chipped edge and the faded blue flowers. And inside it, the engagement ring. He brought it to her in the studio. She gasped when she saw it. You kept it. I forgot I even had it. But it waited for you, just like I did. She took it, turning it over in her fingers, then slid it onto her hand. Let's not waste another minute, she whispered. They didn't. That night, long after the city lights had dimmed and the soft hum of street traffic had faded into background lullabies, Elizabeth stood alone in the sunroom. The moonlight spilled across the wood floor like a second canvas. She looked down at the ring now resting on her finger, simple, elegant, unchanged. Like him, Victor entered silently, barefoot, holding a folded blanket. He paused in the doorway, watching her as though he feared she might vanish again. You okay? He asked. She turned, smiling softly. I was thinking about the first time we said I love you. Remember? On the fire escape. He chuckled. You had paint on your nose. You said I looked like a mad scientist. I meant it as a compliment. She walked toward him slowly. You know what I never told you? What? I still loved you, even after everything. His breath caught. I tried not to, she went on. Tried to hate you for leaving, for being a coward. And I did. For a while. But love is stubborn. Victor wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and pulled her into him. I never stopped either. That night, I walked away. I think I lost more than just you. I lost who I was supposed to be. She rested her head against his chest. Well, Maybe we get to become those people now. He held her tighter. Together. In the months that followed, Elizabeth became something of a legend in the art world. Galleries that had once turned her away now begged to display her work. Yet she remained humble, redirecting most offers to the women of Lizzie's light. "This program isn't about me," she told one collector. "It's about voices we stopped listening to. Let's amplify theirs first." She mentored a young woman named Graciela, a former domestic abuse survivor who had lived in subway tunnels for almost 2 years. Graciela sculpted grief into porcelain, delicate, painful, breathtaking. One day, after class, Graciela lingered behind. "Miss Elizabeth?" "Yes, sweetie. I used to want to die every night. Now, I just want to wake up and make clay angels." Elizabeth swallowed hard. "You are an angel," she said, brushing a tear from the girl's cheek. Moments like that became her oxygen. Victor, meanwhile, expanded the foundation's mission. They launched new housing initiatives, mental health clinics, and job training centers, all under a new campaign. Dignity is not a luxury. He made fewer public appearances, leaving most speeches to Elizabeth. The board questioned this change at first. "You're the face of the foundation," one trustee argued. "People expect you." "No," Victor said calmly. "People expect results, and she delivers them." When Elizabeth took the podium at the United Nations to speak about homelessness and trauma recovery through art, Victor sat front row. She began with a painting, "The Woman in the Mirror." "She looks like me," Elizabeth said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Because she is me. But she also looks like the woman who slept under the scaffolding near 86th Street. Or the one riding the D train back and forth all night because she had nowhere else to go." The crowd sat breathless. "I was brilliant once," she continued, "and I still am. But no one saw me when I needed it most. So now, we see each other. Fully. Fiercely. Finally." A standing ovation followed. Victor cried openly. Not for the pain behind her words, but for the power she now wielded because of them. That fall, they celebrated their first wedding anniversary. Instead of a party or a trip, Elizabeth asked to spend the evening at the residency house with the women. "We'll order Chinese," she said. "Maybe sit on the floor and tell stories." Victor smiled. "Sounds perfect." She wore a soft cream sweater and jeans. No jewels. No flash. Just comfort. The women gave her a gift, a painting. A portrait of her, surrounded by sunflowers and tiny stars painted along her silhouette. Underneath, the words, "She helped us grow where no light reached." Elizabeth cried for the first time in weeks. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Yes, you do," Tanya said, hugging her. "You saved us. Now let us give you something back." That night, Victor found her on the rooftop, watching the skyline. "They gave me back parts of myself I forgot existed," she said. He kissed the top of her head. "They simply showed you what I've seen all along." The following winter brought a harsh snowstorm that shut the city down for 3 days. Power flickered in parts of Brooklyn. Transit stalled. But at the Ellington residence and the Lizzie's Light Housing Center, every heater stayed on, every fridge stayed stocked. Victor and Elizabeth volunteered to cook for the residents that week. She made stew. He tried baking cornbread. It came out like bricks. She teased him for weeks. During that storm, an elderly man named Samuel was found nearly frozen under the Williamsburg Bridge. He had once been a professor, lost his home after his wife's death. Now, nobody recognized him except Elizabeth. She visited his hospital bed, holding his hand through his delirium. When he finally opened his eyes, he whispered, "Beth Montgomery?" She smiled. "Yes, Sam. It's me." He wept. "You're still alive. So are you." They brought him into the residency program, gave him a room, a sketch pad, and endless tea. Within a month, he was drawing Agon fractals and poems side by side. As the anniversary of the program's founding approached, the foundation planned a gala. Elizabeth resisted. "I don't want to be turned into a spectacle," Victor reassured her. Then we won't make it about you. We'll make it about them. She agreed on one condition, that Graciela, Tanya, and Sam all be given a platform that night. The gala was held at the Brooklyn Museum. Over 500 people attended, including city officials, celebrities, and former shelter coordinators. But the true stars were the artists. Tanya read a poem called Cardboard Crowns. Sam unveiled a haunting pencil sketch of a city wrapped in chains, breaking free into light. Graciela, trembling, told the story of her escape from an abusive marriage and how Lizzie's light gave her back her breath. Elizabeth didn't speak until the end. She stood at the podium, hands steady, gaze sharp. I used to think survival was enough, she said. That waking up and enduring the day was a victory. She paused. But I was wrong. Healing is the victory. Loving again is the revolution. And making art in a world that tried to erase youth, that's power. Victor stood and clapped first. Then the room followed. After the gala, they walked hand in hand down the museum steps. The wind was cold, but neither of them shivered. You changed the world, Victor said. No, Elizabeth corrected. We did. They stood beneath the glow of a street lamp, surrounded by quiet and starlight. And for once, there was no past chasing them, only the present, and the long, golden road ahead. It was nearly 2 years to the day since Victor had found Elizabeth on the park bench, and still, the memory burned bright in both of them, not as a scar, but as a quiet flame. They often visited that bench together, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. It had become their sacred ground, the place of breaking, the place of beginning again. On one such morning in late spring, Victor arrived early. He brought a thermos of her favorite tea chamomile, with lavender and a bag of almond biscotti. Elizabeth arrived 10 minutes later, wearing a long beige coat and a floppy straw hat. She looked every bit the artist she had once imagined she'd become at this age. They didn't speak right away. Then she said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been on that bench that day?" Victor didn't hesitate. "I would have walked past the most important miracle of my life." She smiled, brushing crumbs off her lap. "You've gotten better with words since your banker days. Years of watching you do it right." She turned to him. "I still get afraid sometimes." "Of what?" "Of losing all this. Of waking up and realizing it's a dream. That I'm still in that shelter in Harlem, and this was just something I imagined on a cold night." Victor took her hand gently. "If it is a dream, then we're dreaming together. And I'm not waking up." That summer, Elizabeth was diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's. The tremors began subtly, her brush slipping more than usual, her handwriting uneven. She noticed it first, before anyone else, and hid it for weeks. When she finally told Victor, it was after dinner one night, over wine and quiet music. He didn't react the way she expected. There was no panic, no collapse, just a long pause, a deep breath. And then, "Okay, what do we need to do?" She looked up, startled. "You're not afraid?" "Of course I'm afraid," he said. "But fear's not going to help you. Planning will. Patience will. Love will." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You're really not going anywhere, are you?" He leaned in, kissed her temple. "Not this time." They adapted quickly. Elizabeth began therapy to keep her coordination sharp. She switched from oils to acrylics to minimize the mess from shaking hands. Victor bought her a specialized easel that adjusted angles at the touch of a button. Her art changed. It became more abstract, more fluid, but no less powerful. One piece titled "Shaking Light" depicted a figure painted in broken strokes of blue and gold, reaching for a sun that danced beyond clear edges. It sold within hours of being displayed. People didn't pity her. They celebrated her evolution. Elizabeth refused to let her diagnosis define her. But she didn't hide it either. She spoke openly at the residency, telling the women there, "This body may slow down, but the fire doesn't fade. It just flickers differently." Later that year, a young journalist from The New Yorker requested an interview with her and Victor for a feature titled "The Art of Repair." They agreed. The interview lasted nearly 4 hours. They spoke of trauma, privilege, legacy, and regret. But what caught the journalist most was when Elizabeth said, "The world tried to bury me, but real love was the shovel that dug me out." That quote became the title of the article. It went viral in under 48 hours. People from around the globe wrote letters to Lizzie's light. Survivors, artists, runaways, veterans, widows, all saying the same thing in different words. I thought I was the only one. One evening, Victor and Elizabeth stood on the balcony, watching the city sparkle below them. She wore fingerless gloves now, her fingers not as nimble as they once were, but still strong enough to hold his hand. "You know," she whispered, "when I was at my lowest, I used to fantasize about this life. Not with a man, not with riches, just with peace. A studio, a bed of my own, hot food I didn't have to fight for." Victor tightened his grip. "You have all that now." "I do," she said, "but I've realized something." "What?" "Even more than peace, I needed witnesses. Someone to see me. Not just look, but see." He turned to her. "You are seen, Lizzie, by so many." She smiled. "But first by you." The foundation continued to grow. By its 5th year, Lizzie's Light had expanded to 3 cities: New York, Chicago, and Atlanta. Over 100 women had completed the program. Nearly all had found permanent housing. Many had entered the art world. Some even became mentors themselves. Elizabeth began training others to take over parts of the program. She wasn't stepping back, just stepping wisely. "I won't be here forever," she told Victor. "But this will be, and that's what matters." He nodded. "It's the most beautiful thing we've ever made." She laughed softly. "Even more than your cornbread. Especially more than my cornbread." On Elizabeth's 75th birthday, the Metropolitan Museum held a private exhibit in her honor, From the Shadows, the resurrection of Elizabeth Montgomery. She walked the halls slowly, holding Victor's arm. Her paintings lined the walls in chronological order, gritty, sorrowful sketches from the street years, evolving into bold, defiant, and finally tender strokes of color and hope. At the end of the exhibit stood her final self-portrait. She had titled it Homecoming. It showed a woman with silver hair, seated at a park bench, surrounded not by trash bags or pigeons but by women painting in the grass around her. She smiled, gently, her eyes full of fire and weariness. Her hands were worn, but open. Below it read a quote in golden script: "There is no expiration date on healing." That night, back in their home, Victor lit candles and placed her favorite jazz vinyl on the record player. They danced in the living room slowly, gently. She leaned her head on his chest, and they swayed in silence. "I could die happy," she said softly. He pulled back. "Don't. I'm not planning to. I'm just saying if it came tomorrow, I'd be ready." He kissed her forehead. "You've earned that peace." "I want you to promise me something," she said. "Anything. If I ever forget who I am, remind me. Show me the art. Read me the letters. Bring me to the bench." "I will," he whispered, voice cracking. "I swear I will." She lived for 5 more years. Her Parkinson's worsened, but never defeated her. She continued to paint with help. She continued to mentor. Even when she couldn't speak clearly anymore, she used her eyes, her smile, her presence to guide the women she loved. When she passed quietly, in her sleep, on a rainy Thursday morning, Victor sat beside her for hours, holding her hand, whispering poems to the quiet. He buried her with the ring. The casket was simple, but her legacy wasn't. At her memorial, held under a white tent in Central Park, more than 500 people gathered. They read her poems. They displayed her final sketches. One by one, women from Lizzie's Light stood and said her name aloud. "She saved me. She saw me. She made me believe again." Years later, the bench where Victor first found her was officially renamed by the city. Elizabeth's Bench. There, engraved on a small bronze plaque, were her final words to the world. "Even when the world forgets you, do not forget yourself. You are still art. You are still light. Victor visited the bench every week until his own passing 3 years later. His ashes were scattered beneath the same oak tree where they'd first reunited. And on warm spring days, the women of Lizzie's light could often be found nearby laughing, sketching, dreaming. Witnessed. Remembered. Home.